And let me tweet it.
And I'll add my, meager amount of followers, retweet. All of which are presumably the same people that are following you. So I guess it's completely useless.
Say that again?
I said I'll retweet it, but of course all of our followers are probably the same, or at least my followers are probably the same.
Always
as yours.
helps. Always helps. All right. There you go. Okay.
All right.
Hello.
Hello. Hello, friends.
Hi.
It is the community stand-up. It looks like John has a lower third. You failed to make your lower third happen, Glenn. Tragedy.
I did.
It
is a tragedy.
I will turn mine off in protest.
I would. Could you perhaps rephrase it as I'll turn mine off in solidarity rather than protest?
No, it
feels a much more.
Protest. Cool. So Damien's not here, but we have double the awesomeness on behalf of Glenn Condren and Cesar Blum Silveira. How are you?
Hey, good.
So can we get to the important? How badly did Scott just butcher your name?
Not too bad.
Not too bad. Okay.
Why are you going to assume that I butchered it? I worked very hard on that.
Yeah, that was obviously to good effect. I'm impressed.
How's it going, Cesar? Who are you?
So I'm a developer in the ASP.NET Core team. I work mostly on Castrol, and yeah, right now I'm working on adding HTTP2 support to Castrol.
Cool. So you are a guest star for the show, and Glenn is here only to help with Google Hangouts.
Which I failed to do, apparently.
Which you had one job.
Although David had said too, you have some stuff you could share if you want, right, Glenn? I mean, you could talk about what's going on, what you're doing.
I will let you lead then, John, because you know what's happening.
Oh gosh, well, I think first we're going to start with a cool demo, right? Let's just jump into that. You want to show off?
See how amazing John Galloway's lower third looks?
Yeah.
Lovely. All right, that was a great intro, John. Thank goodness you're here. I don't know how I would have been able to do that without you.
Why on earth would I try and explain what he's going to do? He showed me his demo and it blew my mind. Okay, he showed me the beginning.
That was your intro.
Mm-hmm.
Should we just?
All right. This has gone horribly.
Man, Damien's been gone for 5 minutes and the whole world is falling apart.
Everyone's like, where's Damien? Viewership has dropped off by half.
No. We just need to get to the code. That's kind of how we'll salvage this.
People. Show us.
You can share your screen?
Yep.
If you can remember how to share your screen. It's not as obvious anymore, right? Because because you did it via a Google call last time and not via a Google Hangout.
Oh, yeah.
So see that?
Here.
Up.
Yeah.
Helping. Look at that.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay. And then minimize this. And then job.
Awesome.
Can you see the gloriousness?
I do.
Awesome.
All right.
Scott, do you have to do it? We should lock on their screen, right?
I have done that.
Awesome.
That has been my value. All right. So what are we looking at here? Other than that's a really nice prompt, by the way.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's it's a power line on Z Shell.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm gonna run a simple MVC app, but the cool thing is that it's gonna be running on HTTP2. So let's start it.
Mm-hmm.
All right, it's running.
Okay, cool. So this is just so far you're doing nothing that everybody who's done Hello World and ASP.NET Core has done, right?
Yeah, that's right. The difference is here I have some traces in Castrol itself, and we can see we're reading HTTP2 frames. Like here's a settings frame, a window update frame, a bunch of priority ones, and here's an interesting one, headers. That's for the first request that we got.
Did it negotiate? Is HTTP2 something where you hit it with a regular HTTP 1/1.1, and then it says no upgrade, or do you hit it with HTTP2 by default?
No, yeah, this is HTTP2 with TLS. So there's an ALPN. So I'm using the ALPN extension to negotiate the application protocol. There's no clear text upgrade here.
What is that word that you're saying?
ALPN, that's application layer protocol negotiation. Right. It's an extension to the TLS protocol where the two peers can negotiate which application protocol they're going to use to talk to each other.
Mm-hmm. So it's worth pointing out that you're on localhost, you're on 5000, but it is HTTPS. Where did the cert come from?
It's a self-signed cert.
Okay. And did you have to do that? That was a step that you had to do at some point before this?
Yeah, I had to. I generated a self-signed cert, and yeah, that's it.
And that's partly necessary because HTTP2 requires TLS, right?
Yeah, that's
HTTPS.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Does that mean that when someone is doing Hello World, at some point everyone is going to have to think about TLS, or will we try to hide that from them and make it easier?
Sorry, can you say that again?
I'm saying that I'm imagining someone sits down and does their .NET New Web and hits enter and it just works. How does it just work with the self-signed cert?
Well, yeah, unless we put it in the template, there's going to be some setup involved. I did
just work through some of this, and I noticed some updates to the docs recently as far as making it easier, like spelling out, here's how to set up HTTPS.
So we know that this is required, that TLS is required, and we know that it's somewhat painful to set up sometimes, or all the time, I suppose.
Yeah.
And so we do have some items on the backlog to say HTTPS all the time and everywhere is a thing. We have to look at everything that we do and decide if we can make anything better. But we haven't actually done design work to know exactly what those things are or might be. But you should hopefully expect something to make it easier to be HTTPS all the time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I should point out that TLS is not strictly required. The HTTP2 spec says you can do it over clear text with an upgrade request, but no browsers have implemented that so far. There are other HTTP clients that support HTTP2 over an upgrade request, but yeah. So far, the only work I've done is with TLS.
Yeah. We already know that browsers in general are not trying to do that stuff, right? Like Chrome, for example, is directly opposite to that. Chrome is making it more difficult to not be HTTPS, right? They're adding more and more warnings and making it much more scarier if you ever go to a place that has any HTTPS, any mixed mode HTTPS or anything like that.
Yeah.
So it doesn't surprise me that browsers aren't kind of supporting it out.
So what do you see different when you're in network tools? Does the network tools?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That was what you were about to demo, right? Before.
Yeah. I just wanted to show a couple more things. I mean, Firefox kind of bailed on me earlier. Like I don't know why it was just showing a blank screen, and even though the logs were showing that things were being loaded. But yeah. So
wait a second. Why is Firefox saying it's not secure?
It's self-signed.
It's a self-signed cert.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's why. So I'm gonna head over to Wireshark to show that I'm not, lying to anyone. Like, so here are the HTTP2 frames. This is the request coming from Firefox.
What was the first frame?
Yeah. Sorry.
The first frame. I'm trying to get my head around so that I know the answer to this, but I'm trying to get my head around how you're in the browser, you type whatever.com, you hit enter. What is the first frame? Is it I know all the negotiation process, but the ALPN, does it initially scroll up to, can you get up to like frame number 1?
Oh, yeah. So do you want to see the SSL part or?
Like, I want to understand.
Yeah, so
go ahead.
Yeah, right as you start, the client will send a client hello TLS message, and if we look in here, if we open the extensions part.
There it is. That's what I wanted you to show.
Yeah.
The reason of this is that people who might be watching this might not understand how this works, and they might assume that this is being negotiated at a different level. They might assume that the browser, people might assume that the browser says, hey, HTTP1 like it's always been, and then go and do a switching and upgrade.
When it's done over, when it's done over TLS, the protocol is negotiated, at the TLS level. As we can see here, the browser is saying we can either talk HTTP2, which is represented by the H2 token, or we can talk HTTP1. But then Kestrel responds back, yeah, let's talk HTTP2.
Right.
It sends back the H2 token.
I think it's so funny that they picked H2 as the token. Like, it shows that they're so paranoid about perf or whatever. It's like, well, let's not waste 4 bytes by saying HTTP 2.0.
Yeah, especially when the previous one was like HTTP/1.1.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, we've had misspelled header names before, so at least they're not.
Yeah.
So what was the rest of what you were going to show?
Yeah, that was just it. Was just going to show the the HTTP2 frames. This here. No, not this one. But hold on. Oh wait. Okay, let me restart the session.
Lots of things in technology will come and go, but Wireshark is always Wireshark.
Yeah.
And
here's Kestrel sending an HTTP2 back. Yeah, we can see here the server header. There's still some work to do, some optimizations to do, where we can use the the header compression scheme, the HBAC that HTTP2 uses to send headers. But for example, for the status code, I'm already using the compressed header table. So this is a very it's really just 1 byte going over the wire saying this is a status 3 or 4. And we should do that for more headers later.
So as far as like the advantages I get as a user, like serving my site, or sorry, as a developer serving my site with this, like one thing is you get more kind of batching where one request can send back multiple responses. Is that the main thing I'm getting out of this, or what are the big things that I care about as a dev? Like what? Yeah.
Sorry. Okay. Yeah, there are a lot of interesting things going on. One of the main things and one of the main goals of HTTP2 was to have a single connection, but allow multiplexing, like multiple streams of data within that one connection. So instead of having to do weird optimizations like open a bunch of connections against the same server, you can just have one and make multiple requests in there and say which priority you want to give to each one. So you can say, oh, the main content should have the highest priority, but you can deprioritize, say, images or not essential content, and then all that is going through a single connection, and you can interleave frames belonging to different streams, and where each stream corresponds to a different to a different request for different resources.
Right. So like in the past, I would have to worry about things like how many requests can be made at a time, and I might have a subdomain like images.mysite.com and scripts.mysite, whatever. And now you're saying not only can that all be batched together, but I can assign priorities. So I can say first get the content on the screen, then load these specific things. Oh, that's great. Okay.
Yep.
So we've had some people ask, and I'm not sure, like you switched over to Wireshark, and I think we're able to see like most in depth, but does it look different in browser tools? Are you able to show that like in either Firefox or Chrome with the browser tool network?
Good point. I think that Wireshark might be intimidating to some people.
No, I mean, like
it is possible to see in the network tab, but you have to add an
oh,
extra column.
you mean like looking at the net? Yeah.
F12 tools, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
It tells
that's
you
what they're asking about.
Yeah, it tells you the version is HTTP2. Just refresh.
So is this the default on? Is this the default in F12 tools, or did you add something?
This is the default on Safari, right? Is this what this is?
This
Firefox?
is Firefox.
This is Firefox.
Yeah, yeah. We can see here the HTTP2 version. They show it as HTTP2 2.0, even though like the standard says it's just HTTP2. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I think on Chrome tools, this was harder to find, if I remember correctly. You maybe needed to add a column back to the previous screen. I remember playing digging for this before. It wasn't immediately obvious to me in the Chrome tools, I seem to recall, but there was definitely a column you could add called protocol to the general networking table, then the network list to the left there, and it would show in there. I remember being able to see, for example, when I set up a CDN, I could see the CDN doing HTTP2, but my own site not, because I hadn't set up my own site to be that, for example.
Okay. We had a question too. Someone was asking when this, like, will this magically light up on Azure, and also like shipping time frame? Is this something that's in, ASP.NET Core 2.0 or like 2.1 or where, do we have an idea when?
It's not in 2.0. It's kind of barely a prototype right now in 2.1. The intent would be for it to be in 2.1 at the moment. For things like on Antares, there's lots of infrastructure in between the browser and Kestrel when running in Azure App Services. And
so, Antares is the kind of the hosting, or it's
Azure App Services. That's why I said Azure App Services after that. Right. Yeah, Azure App Services. So you asked about that. I thought when you deploy there's a lot of infrastructure between the browser and you, and they are also doing work, I believe, to enable HTTP2 as well. And so you may get you should get some benefits from HTTP2 in general in the future from that. If that makes sense, if that answers your question.
Yeah.
But so this will let you, and I think with the infrastructure layer that's in between you in Azure App Services, interestingly, they may drop. For example, it's possible they could have HTTP2 support before Kestrel has HTTP2 support, and then interesting things might happen where your actual Kestrel, where your app is perhaps not HTTP2, but the connection to IIS is, or something like that. Right? There'll be all sorts of craziness like that in the near future until everything is HTTP2 all the way.
Yeah.
Okay. And you mentioned that one nice thing is that I can set priorities for different resources, and I can control the networking kind of behavior more with HTTP2. Is that something where I would have Kestrel options when I create, when I bootstrap, that I can say configure Kestrel with these options to do that, or how would I set that up?
Yeah, we haven't really designed anything, for that yet, but I think the way you do it is like at least one way you could do it is in your application. Say you have an MVC application, you could like decorate certain things with like a priority attribute, like to say, oh, this is high priority, this is low priority. I think at least that's how I see it from the application developer side.
Is the intent here, Glenn and Cesar, that as a front-end developer or as an ASP.NET developer, I shouldn't have to be thinking too much about it? Because you can see here in the F12 tools that it looks like HTTP. It's not. I'm not having to worry about the batching of things and the streaming of things. I still get to think about status codes. I still get to think about gets and posts. Is this meant to be effectively hidden from me in the good way from an abstractions perspective?
Yeah, mostly. So the idea is that HTTP2 should have the same semantics, or mostly the same semantics as HTTP 1.1. Although there are places where you'd probably think about, if I'm running on HTTP2, then I'd like to, signal like these options, like priorities. And HTTP2 also has a feature called server push, which allows the server to anticipate, certain requests that the client will make, and push those resources before the client even requests them. So the way that would be supported maybe that will require some indication from the developer saying, oh, these resources should be pushed on this request or this kind of request.
And then HTTP2 also gives me some socket kind of support as well. Is that true, or is that?
What do you mean?
I thought I'd read that like now where kind of WebSockets is a totally separate world, I thought HTTP2 made it a little easier to have continuous long-running connections and two-way communication kind of stuff set up. I don't know.
Yeah, well, you can set up a connection and just stream data back and forth. Yeah, so I guess.
Okay. So let's talk about the other reason that I was brought here. Then is at the end of the HTTP2.
Well, I think the delivery mechanism would be, tell us when it's coming, and will it just show up in like a 2.x?
Yeah, it'll be like a 2.x.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. That's the current plan. Is a 2.x. I think somebody in chat just said that there was a tweet like a few minutes ago talking about the Azure HTTP2 timeframes. So if you guys go look at that, I'm sure there'll be a date somewhere.
Well, I guess there's a class of people out there, and I think I am in that class. If you're working at a certain level of abstraction, you would like to just upgrade from 2.0 to 2.x and have it suddenly have HTTP2 show up. I shouldn't have to change my code. I shouldn't have to go into startup.cs, right? I upgrade Kestrel and my site lights up, correct?
Yeah, as far as I'm aware, I believe that's the intent, right?
Yeah.
All right, cool.
Yeah, should.
So,
yes,
so
that's
I wanted to. The only reason I was kind of, I guess, somewhat rudely interrupting was to talk about some of the other things that we were asked about. This kind of fits into a broader theme of features that David Fowler put an issue onto the Kestrel HTTP server repo a few days ago. 4 or 5 days ago. I think you responded, Scott, with a picture of Fred Flintstone, perhaps, on a Project Bedrock.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So in there, this is to talk about more general planning and things of the future. Because one of the things that you start thinking about with, so we have HTTP2, is there's some interesting protocols that happened over HTTP2. gRPC kind of springs to mind. And I think Fowler may have even mentioned it in our chat here, or someone did. So the Project Bedrock issue, Project Bedrock is what happens when you let the engineering team just make up a name on the fly for a thing.
We actually had a really long discussion.
I remember that discussion went for a long time. So it's about the decoupling of the higher level application stack from lower level transports, such that, for example, in the future, we will have SignalR, and SignalR would be able to run on TCP or WebSockets without having to understand whether it's running on TCP or WebSockets. And we'll be able to have a future where we'll be able to support things like MQTT for IoT or gRPC, and you'll be able to get benefits of things like routing and filters and DI and things like that because of the appropriate layering of the stack. And so there's a bunch of stuff happening in the near future to set us up for a world where we can do things like that, and we can have gRPC, for example, go into a controller, or SignalR running over TCP or over WebSockets without knowing. Right? And where we have, an implementation of where Kestrel has libuv and socket-based implementations of those abstractions. So there's a bunch of kind of fundamental work, I guess. low work, like work that for the average ASP.NET developer, you may never kind of notice it or see it, but it'll definitely be there, and it'll enable a whole bunch of scenarios that you'll appreciate at some point. If you're just building, your kind of web ASP.NET Core web app or MVC app or something like that, then you might not hit these things. But once you start doing some other interesting things, especially things like microservices, then all of this goodness will be nice. And then part of the flow-on effect from that as well is today you have this. One of the things that you'll notice one of the things you may notice in that issue is we talk about dispatches, and we talk about dispatches fairly early on in the pipeline. And so one of the things we're talking about is one of the limitations, I guess, or restrictions that we currently work under in MVC is the canonical example I like to use is like cores. In order for us to do cores, so you need middleware and MVC needs kind of an MVC filter to make that work, because there is middleware, your ASP.NET, your request comes into a middleware pipeline, goes through a middleware pipeline, and then eventually it hits MVC, right? And then it's in MVC land at that point, and then how that happens at routing. Right, you call that MVC, that's where your routes happen, that routes into the MVC framework, and that's kind of the way it is. MVC is built on top of ASP.NET Core in that sense. But there's some work and some investigation that is happening where if dispatching is happening earlier, if kind of what you think of as routing is happening earlier, then perhaps MVC can be built as part of ASP.NET Core, such that there is routing middleware, and other middleware can be before or after that, such that you could have middleware that knows what the endpoint of this request is going to be, and it can act appropriately before it necessarily gets to that endpoint. And that enables a bunch of interesting scenarios for us. It makes some simplifications of some of our concepts, and it means that anything that can be implemented as middleware, you can get and use probably on a lot more different transports, because the transport layers will have been abstracted as part of this.
So this allows for driving things down. So like you said, microservices, building services and messaging and things that are beyond standard browser kind of scenarios. Is that kind of the main key?
Yeah, exactly. So you'll start to see gRPC, the ability to do, as I said, all of those protocols and things that I've just mentioned, gRPC and a bunch of things like that.
Awesome.
And then you'll see a bunch of strange things that don't necessarily make sense immediately, like MQTT was one of the things we mentioned, which people don't normally think of when thinking of us. But that's kind of the, I guess, the zooming out of that is that we have lots of people talking to us saying, hey, we're building a microservice style application. We have many, many small, very independent services all talking to each other. And as part of that, we're not necessarily always just doing REST-based communication. We want to do gRPC, we want to do message, we want to do MSQ, we want to do RabbitMQ, or we want lots of those sorts of technologies. But we still want to gain as many of the benefits of ASP.NET Core as we can. We also have people like the Orleans project talking to us about, hey, we want your app, we want your host builder in your program main. We want centralized DI, we want configuration. We would like logging, but most of the rest of the stuff that you have is kind of, but at that point, we'll start to take over at that point, right? And so a lot of the work that we're planning now is how do we build a more generic host builder to allow other application models to take advantage of as much of the lower parts of our stack as they can, but then still using the bits that they want to sit on top. So then you'll also start to see the more generic host model, which we've talked about publicly a few times as well, where you can have a host that is not specific to HTTP. Today, our host builder is a little bit specific to HTTP, and that won't be the truth in the future, or at least there'll be an alternative that is not. They'll probably, because we're not going to break the world, so you probably have two for a little while, but I'm not 100% sure how that's going to play out yet.
So this is an early, what David posted, Project Bedrock on the GitHub issue. That's issue 1920 in the Kestrel HTTP repo. That's kind of a
1980.
1980, sorry. So this is here's what we're thinking about, and then this could eventually turn into features that go into your roadmap and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's right. And we'll start to expect to see a roadmap start to see roadmap-ish things soon. And yeah, the Project Bedrock is kind of a doc that a lot of features will fall out of it. And I think in the near future, you should expect to see a few posts like this, which contain, a page of text or a couple of pages of text, and many kind of issues and design features will fall out of those, and they'll probably take a couple of releases to kind of fully realize. A lot of foundation work will probably happen in the earlier releases, and then you'll start to see features drop built upon those things later. For example, is entirely likely to happen.
Very cool.
I've got one good question. It might. This is a question from on what's it here on YouTube?
The chat.
On the chat. Which of us can explain, or well explain, if not all of us, cores?
Who
wants to do that? Anyone know that backwards and forwards? No?
So,
all right. I mean, I can. How about this? Let's do this. I'll share my screen, and you help me. Is that okay?
Okay.
So here's. Did I share my screen?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I found a bunch of different things on cores to try to explain it to people, but I think that the point is this. And you can correct me if we're wrong here, right? Cores isn't a protocol in the sense of HTTP. It's an agreement. It's a protocol or a standard that's layered on top of HTTP itself. It's an agreement. Cores isn't security because you don't have to follow the rules, right? But because every browser and server follows the rules, therefore it's security. Is that correct, Glenn?
I'm not qualified enough to make statements about what is and is not security. But if you ask Barry,
I think what we can do is I will say declarative statements, and then Nick Craver
he
will say that I'm wrong. That's typically the way that things work. So
and it is an RFC, right? It is a W3C.
No, it's a real thing, right? So if you go and search for cross origin, you'll go and find docs. You'll find Wikipedias. You'll find docs up on Mozilla or whatever. I think there's a cores W3C.
Pretty sure there is.
Standard. There you go. See? And it's not just a standard, it's an old standard.
Yeah.
Right? Old, like in internet years. It's like 20 years, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And the idea is, how do we go from the client side? I'm at hanselman.com. And then how do I talk to Glenn Condren's website, right?
Yeah.
It's cross origin. The origin of my website is hanselman.com. I want to call sideways to you. Is that correct?
Yeah, and it comes back to the problem comes back to the XSS type attacks, right? Cross-site scripting.
Right. So, for example, if I'm logged into Facebook and then I visit John Galloway's website, if John Galloway has the access, no one visits your website. if I visit,
but if I could write some malicious code, which I do, and it would be JavaScript that will access Facebook cookies.
Exactly.
Right? And in case
and JavaScript resources, more specifically, not just cookies. It's about I'm logged in, and you're going to go and call sideways.
Yep, and do all kinds of crazy stuff. And in the case that you're not logged into Facebook, no worries. But if 1,000 people hit my site in a year, and you're one of them, and you're logged into Facebook, then I can do bad things. Right?
Exactly. So presumably these things would just keep working on top of HTTP2 because they're just headers, correct? So here's an example where I can go and say, well, any resource can talk to me.
Yeah.
Or
which is the equivalent of right-clicking on the C drive and saying allow all, so I can work out what this permissions problem is.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Or I can go and say, well, only people who are calling from developer or calling from MSDN or whatever. So you can go to your favorite website, look at their access control origin headers, and make a decision about whether or not it's appropriate to try to hit them or not. Yeah. So that's the general idea. I wonder why people make it so complicated. I mean, I know it's frustrating. But
it's frustrating when you hit the problem, right? Because a lot of you don't really understand. All you're really trying, as Nick just said in chat, right? It's like the thing that you curse at the second multiple domains get involved, because you're trying to just talk to your stuff, and suddenly, because there's two different domains, it falls apart, and you don't really understand why, and then you've got to go on this dance. And as soon as security gets involved, people get scared, and people get really careful about making statements about things, and it makes it hard to understand, right?
Yeah, and the doc that's on, if you go to the docs.microsoft.com, the Cores doc is relatively long. Like there's a good amount of stuff, and in terms of different policy options and different, blah blah blah. It can be tricky, especially when you don't control the different domains, right? So like if you want to make a request to someone that doesn't have Cores enabled, that can be difficult and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Cool.
So, yeah.
Thank you, Glenn and Cesar, for coming by and hanging out and showing us cool stuff. So this you're going to ship it tomorrow, right, Cesar?
I wish.
If he ships it tomorrow, it will not function on anybody's machine except his.
No. Okay, so this is works on my machine is what we're looking at.
Yeah.
Well, I've tested on a couple different machines, and it works on Mac and on Linux, but that's because I'm like invoking OpenSSL directly. I mean, you could compile OpenSSL for Windows, but I haven't tested that. So yeah, I think it'll only like see the light of day once we get like official ALPN support for SSL stream. But
this is a good point. But actually, just quickly dropping back to Cores from Chris Gomez, right? Because because the client is the thing that does the authentication, does the validation of Cores. A bunch of different clients you could be using to hit your thing won't be necessarily honoring them. Like his example is the Postman doesn't, which means Postman will work fine, and then you try and do the thing from an actual website from a thing with a browser, and everything falls apart there, which also adds to your frustration. So remember that. Yeah.
Cool, John. People are sad that you are not. You don't have any community stand-up stuff. I made the decision where it was a bit of a, we had to get stuff set up for who was going to be on the call and what they're going to show and the tech setup stuff. I had a few links. I've jumped in before and shown them when I wasn't prepared to discuss them in detail, and it didn't go well. So I'm pushing until next week, and we'll give the links the credit they deserve. Sound good? The respect that they deserve. We want triple the links, John Galloway.
Don't do that.
All right, cool.
You'll get one of these 20 link weeks.
I think what everybody said was flood John Galloway with as many leaks as possible.
All right, bring him on.
So last question, everyone on the live chat, let us know, did you like this? Do you want more guests? Is Cesar your favorite developer? You can follow him on GitHub and watch his HTTP2 check-ins. Do you want more tech chats like this from Cesar and his friends? Let us know, and we will try to put those together for you. Cool, because it doesn't always have to be about Damien and John Galloway.
Right.
All right, cool. Now, this is an important part of the process, Cesar. I don't know if you watch the show. You have to do the dramatic zoom out. Have you told him about this, Glenn?
I haven't. Have you watched community stand-up before?
I
Have you
think
seen
it's
the
a part
dramatic
of it,
zoom out?
but not.
Okay, so you have to hang on to this. Now,
He's never seen it before.
Now, you probably should zoom all the way in onto yourself first, and then do the zoom out. Because there's two people here, so I already zoomed out fairly far, right?
Literally everyone is saying more guests.
Yeah, everybody loved it.
All right.
So Fowler was supposed to be here today for the people who are asking for David Fowler.
So
he
first
very late in the day threw me in the water.
All right.
Yeah, so now
everyone but
this-
Maher.
Go.
Okay, here you go. Dramatic zoom out. It's so dramatic. Thank you.
Wonderful.